The next thing that we're going to talk about is the rising cost of goods and services. Over the weekend, the OPEC Plus partners failed to meet an agreement over what they wanted to do with the oil market. They met over and tried to decide, are we going to actually start having more supply and start giving more oil production? Because OPEC are the ones they're basically a cartel that protects or controls the production of oil. And they met over the weekend and they just could not agree on whether or not to increase oil production. This means that oil prices will continue to rise, and likely there's a very huge possibility that it's going to go over $80 a barrel. Right now it's about $70, $77 a barrel, and I think at the end of this summer we might be creeping up to closer to $90 a barrel. And to be honest, I felt it when I drove down to see my brother this past weekend. I felt those costs because I was buying gas. Usually it cost me, I think we've talked about it before. Usually it cost me about $50, or not even $50. Usually it cost about $28 to $30 maybe. But this weekend it was costing me like $40 to $45, which is extremely expensive, except for when I went to Costco. Yo, I am falling in love with Costco. I'm literally like, yo, Costco is my new thing. Like, Costco is my new thing. I'm going to be all up in Costco. I'm going to be buying gas from Costco because it's so cost effective. Plus, you can buy so much stuff from, oh my gosh. I'm literally falling in love with Costco. But regardless, this is just to show like inflation is a real thing apparently. And we're going to be seeing more and more of these kind of things. And it's not just going to affect gas prices. It's going to go ahead and affect everything else because apparently we have to transport things from place to place. So anything that has to be transported from one place to another, we're going to see a creep up in prices. As long as oil prices continue to creep up, we're going to see an increase in prices. Plus, I expect that combining that with the fact also that we're also switching away from being so dependent on fossil fuels and starting to go into a renewable environment, and companies are now moving their dollars away from investing in oil companies and moving them into more renewable companies. It means that companies like Exxon or Shell or any of these oil companies, now they have to prioritize their profit margins. Before, they could basically just keep on drilling more holes and looking for more places to drill for oil. Now they can't do that anymore. So what companies usually do when they've already expanded as much as possible is they start increasing the prices. They start trying to find, it's kind of like, if you've noticed, if you ever used any service, for example, if you use something like Google, in fact, let's just use Google, for example. At one point, all Google services was free. Now they're telling me that I have to pay a little bit of money to have my photos backed up. Why? Because they've grabbed my attention. They have all that they want from me. Now it's harder for me to go switch and find another service to use that will replace the Google service that I've been using. And that's the whole idea of what happens when a company gets big enough and it has a large enough share market or a large enough market share, it's going to increase its prices. And that's what all companies are going to do. So if they don't increase production, if OPEC doesn't choose to increase its production, those prices are going to continue to go up. Now, combine that also with the fact that governments are now starting to not subsidize oil as much anymore. In case you guys don't know, a lot of the reasons why gas has been so cheap for so long is because it's subsidized by the federal government, which is why I always look at people whenever they're like, oh, the federal government is useless. It's like, man, you really don't know much about economics, or you really don't know much about the decisions that have been made on your benefit. But regardless, basically, it's subsidized by the government. Gas is subsidized by the government. That's why they're able to keep the prices so low. But now those subsidies are being moved slowly over to renewable sources. And as those subsidies are moved away, guess what? Somebody's got to make up that difference. And who's got to make up that difference? You and I. That's what usually happens. And so as that happens, as both of those things, as all these factors start playing around until we move away into a fully renewable source, we're going to have to pay that price. And if we are serious about moving to a new renewable source, we will be willing to pay these prices. That's what happens when you're trying to make changes. For companies, when they're trying to make changes, what they have to do is suffer less profitability for a period of time so they can make those changes within the business. However, for us, we just have to suffer through paying a little bit more for some things like gas and those kind of things for a short period of time so we can go to an environment where we're not killing ourselves, because that's what we're doing with the rate that we're seeing all kinds of lake shrinkage. We're seeing droughts all over the place. We're seeing all kinds of things, famine and all these things happening all over the world. Why is that happening? It's called climate change. We're killing the climate. We're killing the way that we're supposed to be able to depend on the earth. And so when that starts happening, if we're serious about taking climate change and these things seriously, we'll be willing to suffer a short period of time to make those changes over the long term. I hope you enjoyed that little snippet of the Rambling Mind podcast. If you want more of the Rambling Mind podcast, or if you want to listen to the whole episode that you just heard, go check it out on any podcast listening platform, whether that be Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Stitcher. I could go on, but you guys already know which podcast you love to use to listen to. So go check it out. Link down in the description as well. I'm gonna catch y'all later. Peace.